I've worked at the company for almost 8 years. Not the kind of 8 years where you quietly do your job and collect a paycheck. I mean the kind where your work becomes your life. The kind where you answer emails during vacations. The kind where you know every department's problems before their managers do. The kind where people stop introducing you by your job title and start introducing you as the person who keeps this place running. I wasn't officially a manager. Yet somehow every major project ended up on my desk. Every difficult client. Every impossible deadline. Every crisis that needed fixing. And honestly, I loved it. I worked in the strategic development department of a large consulting company. Our team handled partnerships, expansion projects, and major corporate contracts. Success or failure often depended on how well our department performed. For years there had been an unofficial competition inside our team. 3 of us were considered candidates for future leadership positions. Me, Victor, and Samantha. Victor was talented but impatient. Samantha was politically skilled and knew how to build relationships with executives. As for me, I simply worked. Longer hours. More projects. More responsibility. Management noticed. At least that's what everyone kept telling me. Over the years I'd received performance awards, bonuses, and recognition during company meetings. Whenever leadership discussed future managers, my name always appeared. My direct supervisor often joked, "When I retire, they'll probably put you in my chair before the furniture cools down." First I laughed. Eventually I started believing it. Then 6 months ago our department director announced his retirement. A new director of strategic development would be appointed. The biggest promotion available below executive level. The position everyone wanted. The position I'd spent years preparing for. The selection process took months. Interviews. Performance reviews. Executive evaluations. Leadership assessments. Special projects. Everything pointed in one direction. Mine. Even Victor privately admitted it. One evening after a meeting he approached me. "Let's be honest," he said. "About what?" "The promotion." I smiled. "What about it?" "You've already won." Coming from him, that meant something. He wasn't known for compliments. Even Samantha stopped competing aggressively near the end, almost as if she'd accepted the outcome. Meanwhile, senior executives kept assigning me increasingly important responsibilities. Presentations, client negotiations, budget planning, cross-department coordination, the sort of work typically given to someone preparing for leadership. By the time the final announcement day arrived, I wasn't nervous. I was excited. The promotion felt inevitable. The entire office seemed to think so too. That morning I arrived early. People kept stopping by my desk. "Good luck. You deserve it. Don't forget us when you're the boss." Someone even left a congratulatory card on my chair as a joke. By noon, nearly the entire department had gathered in the conference hall. The atmosphere felt electric. Everyone knew why we were there. Everyone knew a decision was about to be announced. I took a seat in the front row. Victor sat 2 rows behind me. Samantha sat near the aisle. Our retiring director stepped onto the stage. The room became silent. He began delivering what sounded like a farewell speech. He talked about teamwork, growth, leadership, trust, building the future. As he spoke, I noticed something strange. He kept looking directly at me, again and again. Every time he mentioned commitment, every time he mentioned excellence, every time he mentioned the future of the department, his eyes returned to me. I could practically feel my confidence growing. This was it. The speech was basically confirmation. I tried not to smile too much, but inside I was already imagining the applause, the congratulations, the new office, the new responsibilities. Years of effort finally paying off. The director reached the end of his speech. I straightened in my chair. My heart was pounding. Any second now. He smiled. Then he said, "And now I'd like to introduce the future leader of this department." The room erupted into applause before he'd even said a name. I was already standing up. Then he pointed toward the conference room doors. The doors opened. A woman walked inside. Tall, elegant, confident, perfectly tailored suit, perfect posture, perfect smile. I had never seen her before in my life. The applause slowly died. Confused murmurs spread through the room. The director walked toward her. Then he shook her hand. "Everyone," he announced proudly, "please welcome our new Director of Strategic Development." For a moment I genuinely thought I had misunderstood. My brain refused to process what I just heard. The woman smiled at the audience. People looked around in confusion. I remained frozen in my seat. The director continued speaking. He listed her achievements. Graduated from one of the most prestigious universities in the world. Completed an internship at a company owned by one of the world's most famous business leaders. Earned additional qualifications from an elite business school. Led several international projects. Received industry awards. The list went on and on. Each accomplishment felt like another nail in the coffin of my promotion. I barely heard the rest. One thought kept repeating in my head. Who is she? And why does she have my job? When the speech finally ended, employees began lining up to congratulate her. Victor joined them. Then Samantha. Then everyone else. I didn't move. The shock was slowly transforming into anger. Not because someone else had won. Because I hadn't even been given a chance. Because this person hadn't competed. Hadn't worked here. Hadn't spent years earning the trust of the team. Yet somehow she was walking away with the position. I stood up and looked for my director. I wanted answers. But he was gone. I checked his office. Empty. Conference rooms. Nothing. Then I looked through a window facing the parking lot. And there he was. His car was already leaving. Just the rear bumper disappearing through the gate. That made me even angrier. He knew. He knew exactly how this looked. And he was avoiding me. I grabbed my bag. Ignored the curious looks from my coworkers. Walked straight to my car. And drove to the one place I knew I'd find him. His house. Because if nobody at the office was willing to explain what happened, I was going to get my answers somewhere else. The drive to my director's house felt longer than it actually was. Every red light irritated me. Every slow driver seemed determined to test my patience. For 8 years I had been professional. For 8 years I had trusted the process. And for 8 years I had believed that hard work would eventually be rewarded. Right now, that belief was hanging by a thread. I pulled into his neighborhood and parked across the street from his house. For a moment I considered turning around. Showing up at your boss's home wasn't exactly normal behavior. Then I remembered the conference room, the speech, the empty office, the disappearing car. No, he owed me an explanation. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. A minute later the door opened. My director looked neither surprised nor annoyed. He looked guilty. That immediately told me everything wasn't as simple as I'd hoped. "Can we talk?" I asked. He sighed. "Come in." I stepped inside. Before I could say anything, he raised his hand. "I'm sorry." The apology only made me angrier. "Sorry for what exactly?" He motioned toward the living room. We sat down. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he finally said it. "I wanted the position to be yours." I stared at him. "Then why isn't it?" He rubbed his forehead. "Because the final decision wasn't mine." That wasn't the answer I expected. "You were the department director." "I was." "You're the person who evaluated candidates." "I did." "You're the person who recommended candidates." "Yes." "Then how was it not your decision?" He looked exhausted. The kind of exhausted that comes from losing a battle you never expected to fight. The board intervened. I frowned. What does that mean? It means several executives above me decided they preferred another candidate. I immediately thought of the woman from the conference room. Why? He didn't answer right away. That silence said more than words. My stomach sank. Why? I repeated. He looked away. Then quietly said, "She's the niece of one of the board members." For a second I genuinely thought I had misheard him. What? The board member pushed hard for her appointment. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. You're joking. I'm not. You're telling me that after months of evaluations, interviews, reviews, and performance assessments. I struggled to finish the sentence. They gave the position to somebody's relative? His silence confirmed it. I stood up. This can't be legal. It's not quite that simple. Actually, it is. I was pacing now. They created a competitive process. Yes. They evaluated internal candidates. Yes. They encouraged us to compete. Yes. And then ignored the results. He didn't respond. Because there wasn't a response. The facts spoke for themselves. I stopped pacing. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was trying to stop it. That caught my attention. What? He leaned forward. For weeks I argued against the decision. I sat back down. They ignored you? They ignored me. What about the other executives? Most of them privately agreed with me. Then why didn't they vote against it? A bitter smile appeared on his face. Because politics doesn't disappear just because you're in a boardroom. That answer felt painfully realistic. Corporate politics. The invisible force behind countless decisions. The thing everyone pretends doesn't exist. I hated that he was probably right. He continued. The board member made it clear that he considered this appointment important. I knew exactly what that meant. Nobody wanted to challenge him. Nobody wanted to risk their own position. Nobody wanted to become the next target. I felt sick. Not because I'd lost. Because the outcome had been decided before the competition even started. The past 6 months suddenly looked different. The interviews. The assessments. The presentations. The feedback sessions. All of it. Had I ever actually had a chance? My director seemed to read my thoughts. You did. What? You had a chance. I looked at him skeptically. If that were true, I'd have the job. No. He shook his head. You had the best qualifications. Apparently that wasn't enough. It should have been. For the first time he sounded angry too. Not at me. At the situation. You outperformed every candidate. I didn't say anything. He continued. The performance reviews weren't close. Still silent. The leadership assessments weren't close either. I looked up. What are you saying? I'm saying that every metric favored you. That was somehow worse. Losing because someone was better would have hurt. Losing despite being the best candidate felt completely different. For a while neither of us spoke. Finally I asked, what happens now? He looked genuinely uncertain. I don't know. That wasn't encouraging. Then he added, but if I know you, you're not going to let this go. For the first time all evening I smiled. A small smile. But a real one. No. I said. I'm not. Because something had changed during this conversation. When I arrived I wanted an explanation. Now I wanted evidence. And deep down, I had a feeling that today's promotion announcement was only the beginning of a much bigger story. Monday arrived far sooner than I would have liked. The anger from Friday hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had settled into something colder. Determination. I wasn't going to storm into human resources. I wasn't going to post a dramatic resignation letter. And I definitely wasn't going to spend my days complaining. I was going to do what I'd always done. Work. Observe. And pay attention. The new director's name was Evelyn. At exactly 9 o'clock she called the entire department into the main conference room. The atmosphere was awkward. Most people were trying to act excited. Others were curious. A few were openly skeptical. Evelyn entered with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. She gave a polished introduction, talked about leadership, innovation, transformation, global perspectives, operational excellence. It sounded impressive, maybe a little too impressive. The speech lasted nearly 40 minutes. By the end, I still didn't know how she intended to improve the department. Only that she possessed several degrees and had worked in several prestigious organizations. When the meeting ended, everyone returned to work. Within 2 hours I noticed the first problem. Evelyn didn't understand how our department actually functioned. Not the theory. The reality. There is a massive difference. A person can understand strategy on paper and still fail to manage a real team. Our department handled dozens of active projects simultaneously. Every client had different expectations. Every contract had different requirements. Every delay created new risks. Success depended on coordination, information, relationships, trust, the sort of things that can't be learned from a resume. Throughout the week, managers repeatedly had to explain basic processes to her. Nothing catastrophic, just strange. Questions someone in her position shouldn't have needed to ask. Victor noticed it too. One afternoon he appeared at my desk. "Tell me I'm not imagining this." "Imagining what?" He lowered his voice. "She has no idea what's happening." I looked around before answering. "That's a dangerous thing to say. That isn't a no." I sighed. "No, it isn't." Victor sat down. 4 years we'd been competitors. Now we were allies simply because reality was impossible to ignore. "Maybe she's still learning," he said. "Maybe." But neither of us sounded convinced. The following weeks exposed larger problems. Evelyn loved meetings. Not useful meetings. Meetings about meetings. Planning sessions for future planning sessions. Discussion groups that generated action items nobody needed. The amount of actual work being completed began to decline. At the same time, client complaints slowly increased. Deadlines started slipping. Projects that normally moved smoothly began stalling. The frustrating part was that most employees still worked as hard as ever. The bottleneck was management. Approvals sat untouched for days. Decisions were delayed. Questions went unanswered. Then came the first major client issue. A multinational company was negotiating a partnership worth millions. My team had spent nearly 4 months preparing the proposal. Research, financial projections, risk assessments, market analysis, everything. The final meeting was scheduled for Wednesday. On Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn requested revisions. Extensive revisions. Not because of new information, because she preferred a different presentation format. I couldn't believe it. "We present tomorrow," I told her. She smiled. "Then we'd better work efficiently." I stared at her. Surely she understood the problem. Apparently not. My team stayed until nearly 3 in the morning. The proposal was rebuilt from scratch. The next day we somehow delivered it on time. The client accepted it. But the victory felt hollow. Half the department was exhausted. Several employees openly complained afterward. For the first time in years, morale was declining. Then something unexpected happened. People started coming to me. Not officially. Unofficially. Managers asked for advice. Project leaders requested guidance. Even employees from other departments began approaching my desk. The same way they always had. One afternoon Samantha sat down across from me. That surprised me. We had spent years competing. She folded her arms. "I owe you an apology." I looked up. "For what?" "I thought I wanted the promotion." I laughed. Past tense. Definitely past tense. That made both of us smile. Then her expression became serious. "You should have gotten it." Hearing those words from a former rival carried more weight than she probably realized. Weeks turned into months. The situation continued deteriorating. Not dramatically. Gradually. The way real corporate problems usually happen. One poor decision. Then another. Then another. Each mistake small enough to explain away. Together, however, they formed a pattern. Clients noticed. Employees noticed. Executives eventually noticed. The first sign came when senior leadership began requesting additional performance reports. Then additional audits. Then special reviews of major projects. Something was happening. And everyone knew it. One evening, while finishing a report, I received a message from my former director. The retired one. The man who had wanted me to get the promotion. The message contained only one sentence. "Keep documenting everything." I stared at the screen. Then read it again. Keep documenting everything. Not fight. Not complain. Not argue. Document. At that moment I realized something important. The company didn't need opinions anymore. It needed facts. And over the previous 3 months, Evelyn had generated plenty of those. What I didn't know was that events were already moving much faster than anyone inside the department realized. And before the year was over, the board would be forced to confront a decision they never expected to revisit. The first official sign that something was wrong came during the quarterly executive review. Normally, departments submitted performance reports and received routine feedback. This time was different. 3 board members attended. Human resources attended. The chief operating officer attended. People who normally had no interest in our department suddenly wanted detailed explanations for everything. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew an investigation had begun. Over the following weeks, requests for information increased. Project timelines, client communications, approval records, budget changes, meeting logs, everything. The company wasn't looking for a scandal. It was looking for answers. And unfortunately for Evelyn, the answers weren't flattering. The numbers told a very clear story. Before her arrival, our department had consistently exceeded targets. After her arrival, performance steadily declined. Not catastrophically, but enough to be measurable. Missed deadlines increased. Client satisfaction decreased. Employee turnover rose. Revenue projections slipped. The data wasn't emotional. It wasn't personal. It was objective. And objective data is difficult to argue with. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Employees started leaving. Not dozens. Just enough to attract attention. One senior manager resigned. Then another. Then two highly respected project leaders accepted offers elsewhere. Losing good people is expensive. Losing experienced people is dangerous. Losing them during a period of declining performance is a nightmare. The executives finally realized the problem wasn't going away. One morning, I received an invitation to a meeting with senior leadership. So did Victor. So did Samantha. So did several other managers. The invitation contained no explanation, just a time and location. When we arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Executives sat around the table. Human resources representatives were present. Several board members attended remotely. The purpose of the meeting quickly became clear. They wanted honest feedback. For nearly 3 hours they asked questions. What was working? What wasn't? What had changed? How were clients responding? How was morale? Nobody attacked Evelyn personally. That wasn't necessary. People simply described reality. The unnecessary meetings. The delayed approvals. The confusion around priorities. The growing frustration among employees. The facts spoke for themselves. When the meeting ended, I felt strangely calm. For months I had been waiting for someone to pay attention. Now they finally were. A few weeks later, another surprise arrived. Evelyn announced an all-hands department meeting. The entire team gathered in the conference room. She looked nervous. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't appear confident. She looked tired. The executives standing behind her looked even more serious. Then she spoke. I have decided to step down from my position. The room went silent. Nobody had expected her to say it so directly. She continued. She thanked the company, thanked the team, spoke about new opportunities, talked about future goals. It sounded like a resignation speech. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't entirely voluntary. Either way, the result was the same. She was leaving. After the meeting ended, employees dispersed in stunned silence. Victor eventually appeared beside my desk. Did that really just happen? Apparently. He shook his head. What now? That was the question everyone was asking. The answer arrived 2 weeks later. Another company-wide meeting was scheduled. This time I refused to assume anything. I remembered what happened the last time I thought I knew the outcome. The conference room filled. Executives took their places. The chief operating officer stepped forward. He spoke about lessons learned, accountability, leadership, transparency. Then he addressed something that surprised everyone. The promotion process itself. An internal review had concluded that the previous appointment process had not been conducted appropriately. The room became completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody even checked their phones. Then he said something I never expected to hear. The company made a mistake. I honestly thought I was imagining it. Large corporations rarely admit mistakes, especially publicly. Yet there it was, clear and undeniable. The company had made a mistake. The review recommended a new leadership selection process, one based entirely on performance, qualifications, and results. This time, multiple independent executives participated. External consultants reviewed candidates. Documentation was verified. Everything was scrutinized. The process took another month. Unlike before, I didn't tell anyone what I expected. I simply continued working. Eventually the final meeting arrived. I sat in the same conference room, the same building, the same front rows. Yet everything felt different. This time I wasn't imagining future applause. I wasn't celebrating early. I wasn't assuming anything. I simply waited. The announcement came. And this time my name was called. For a moment I didn't move. After everything that had happened, it felt unreal. Then the room erupted into applause. Real applause. Not the imaginary version I'd spent months picturing. Victor stood first. Then Samantha. Then the rest of the department. I looked around the room and realized something important. The promotion itself wasn't the victory. The title wasn't the victory. The office wasn't the victory. The victory was knowing I never compromised who I was. I never sabotaged anyone. Never spread rumors. Never played political games. Never stopped doing the work. In the end, the thing that finally changed the outcome wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was evidence. Facts. Results. Performance. The same things that had earned me the opportunity in the first place. A year later, I still lead that department. Victor runs one of our largest divisions. Samantha became one of the strongest managers in the company. Together we've rebuilt the team. Client satisfaction is higher than ever. Revenue is growing again. And occasionally someone asks me what I learned from the entire experience. My answer is always the same. Corporate politics can delay the right decision. Sometimes for months. Sometimes for years. But if you're lucky, and if the organization is willing to face reality, results eventually become impossible to ignore. And when that day comes, all the work you did while nobody was watching suddenly matters. A lot.